Paranormal Experience with Kat Hobson covers paranormal experiences, haunted locations and their histories, high strangeness, including cryptozoology and ufologists, psychics, mediums, authors, and media personalities. Join her as she seeks to bring light to those things that exist by hiding in the dark. Here she is, your amazing host, Kat Hobson.
Hello there. Welcome to Paranormal Experience with Kat Hobson. I'm so glad that you're here. I have got a really great show lined up for you. I'm very excited to be able to welcome Michael Kopf, and we're going to get right to him. I think that Michael is probably one of the earliest people that I met through my connection with Captain Rob and Ghost Ship Hunters. And I am so glad that we came across each other's path. He's a brilliant podcaster. He is a wonderful human. I've interviewed him before, and a couple of times, really. And, I just am never, ever bored when I talk to him, and I always learn stuff. You probably will too, because he just shares so naturally. And he is the host of The Energy That Surrounds Us. He works for Rumble. He works for everyone, but I'm kidding. But he is everywhere. So without further ado, hi, Michael.
Hi.
Hey, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for that awesome introduction. That was really sweet.
Well, we didn't really touch all of it. But I had to get you online before we ran out of time. I mean, you have so many things that you do. You're always busy.
I am, and it seems like whenever I try to take a break, something catches my interest, and all of a sudden I'm in a new project, and I'm like, man, whatever happened to free time?
Well, my husband always laughs because, doing 2 shows and being always on the road with doing different things, I don't think that I get a lot of free time either. And if you throw grandchildren in there, it's definitely that way. But what's fun is that I don't miss out, because when I'm like, I don't have any time to do anything fun. And he's like, you think everything's fun. And you love what you do. You love to investigate. You love to host your shows. You love to meet new people and bring them on and share them with other people. And, you love game days. You love play dates. So it's never boring. But I'm always busy.
No, and I have to agree. It's, I enjoy my shows and talking with people and sharing their experiences. So it's not really feeling like work. And I have expanded my network base, which is really a lot of fun too, because it opens up new avenues. And at the same time, it's like you sit there and you think to yourself, oh, now I got to do this, this, and this. And it's like, actually, no, sometimes it's just a matter of clicking one button and done. You're all set. And it's like, wow.
It's fun when you get, and you do have all your ducks in a row. Your show's everywhere. And it's a lot of fun to be able to watch. I've watched you grow. And to me, it's been fascinating because not everyone has the go get it that you do. And you just get after it. And it's really no matter what it is, whatever it is, if it's something you enjoy, you're all over it.
That's true. And, it is funny you say that because, yeah, I have known you my entire podcast career. And
Yes.
it's kind of fun to every once in a while. People will ask me, well, what was your first show? And I'm like, you would have to ask me that because now I don't remember what it was called. But at the time, I could write it off like
Yeah.
no tomorrow. And it's like funny how life turns into that to where you're like, wow, it's hard to believe I started a year and a half ago. Well, is it a year and a half or 2 years ago?
I think it's been
Almost.
2 years. Yeah.
But yeah, and I mean, it's been quite a ride, and I've met a lot of really cool people. And there's only one guest that I've yet to get on my show that I really want to get on, and it's because my own fault. I schedule too far in advance, and that would be you.
Well, I'll tell you what. If you want me to come on, I don't care how far in advance you have to book me. I'll put it in my calendar, and I trust that you will remind me in case I lose my calendar, which happens sometimes. But
Oh, believe me, I have 3 for that very
yep,
reason.
yep. And because my iPad died, my iPhone died, I lost my paper calendar, and so I was relying on my watch until I could get things replaced. And so I just got my iPad back today. So it's been
Wow,
like, oh my gosh. But, when things go awry, they go awry in tremendous fashion.
absolutely. And
So,
I got to give kudos to you because I could not imagine running a podcast show and everything from a watch, the schedule and everything. I'm
well,
like,
schedules, yeah.
ooh,
I
those things
did.
are so small.
I know, right? But when I was at the beach, I was using a laptop I do a laptop to actually do the shows, but it's not Apple. So I do have a MacBook, but StreamYard does not play well with iOS. So it's easier just to use a Windows laptop. It's the compromises you have to make for technology sometimes.
Right. And then it's like, and if you don't have the laptop, I've had a couple of friends try and do phone, and they're like, well, I don't have this browser or that browser. And I'm like, those are the only 2 choices you have. So
Yep.
either pick one or gotta figure out another way. And so I started
Well,
doing Zoom on a couple.
well, if you're using your phone, normally you can just an iPhone or other types, you can usually get the Google Chrome app, and StreamYard does play with the Google Chrome.
Right.
It will not play. That's the only reason I can sometimes get in on my MacBook, and I just decided that it wasn't worth the stress of not being able to start on time and stuff. So I switched. I always blame it on ghosts.
There you go.
There you go.
They're
Paranormal
not here to
show.
defend themselves.
I do get a lot of very strange happenings with my connectivity, and sometimes the interface with my guests is everything is fine, everything reads fine, and yet, especially if they're in a haunted location or if I'm broadcasting from a haunted location, that can be a little bit hairy. And thank you for saying that I'm the only guest that you wanted that you haven't had. That's really sweet. It just dawned on me what you said. Oh my goodness.
Oh,
Thanks.
you're very welcome.
So
And
I
it's
appreciate
because we
that.
do have that history.
We do. And, you know, for everybody that doesn't listen to my show all of the time, and I know, Michael, that there are a lot of people here to see you, but I live on the flight path of Birmingham Airport. It is not an international airport, although it aspires to be. So if you hear a plane, it's a plane. It's not, I don't think it's supposed to be thunder. So just letting you know. I'm not lifting off, and Michael's not flying away either. But, you know, I know the answer to this, but we've picked up a lot of new listeners being here with KUNX. And when you got into the paranormal, what was your impetus for that? Was it personal experiences, things that go bump in the night, somebody turns you on to it, you saw ghost hunters or ghost adventures, or what pulled you in?
Yeah, it's interesting because I grew up being in what I thought was everything being metaphysical, spiritual, and having all these experiences. And my mind was like, okay, yeah. And then I started watching and talking with people in the paranormal, and I would watch shows like Ghost Hunters and Ghost Hunters International. And I was
Mhm.
like, wait a minute. Some of these experiences are identical to what I was experiencing. So then I was like, oh, I actually grew up in the paranormal.
Yes.
Okay. And so then I was like, well, this is the, TV, so I'll just keep it to myself and keep quiet, and I'll chat every once in a while in the Facebook group about stuff. And by group, I mean Ghost Ship Hunters.
Right. Which I
And
love.
oh, I know. We have such fun in that group.
Got a
But
fun
then
leader.
we do. And then I was on a retreat slash meeting on a location somewhere, and I get a Facebook message from someone, and they're like, "Hey, we have a paranormal team, and we would like you to join our team. What do you think?"
Yeah.
And my response was, "Wait, you mean this is real? People actually do this?" And
Yeah.
they were like, "Yeah." So then, as soon as I got back in town, I pretty much was like in town for like a week or two. Went right on in my first investigation, and it's been a nonstop ride ever since.
What happened on your first investigation?
So we went to Yorktown Memorial Hospital, and I could feel like spirits around, and I could feel different energies around, and I probably heard some, but I wasn't so attuned yet and comfortable in embracing my abilities that, I probably dismissed a lot. But I would walk around and I'd feel drawn to certain areas, so I'd go over there and I'd get like orbs or other stuff in photos. But it was like, and then when I left, it's like I still had some questions, and I was like, and I don't think I fully truly understood what was going on around me, because being the first time, it's like you're in a whole new world, so you don't know what's what and how everything works or anything about equipment. So I was like, okay. And then I get back and they were like, well, now we're going to go to this location. So I was like, okay. And so just kind of went from location to location, never really took time to process what all I was experiencing. And it hit me when a few months later, a friend named Steven I just had met had a network and said, would you like a show? I think you would do great at podcasting. And if you can believe it, I said no, because I'm too new. I don't know anybody. So I didn't feel comfortable opening up about paranormal, because I felt like nobody'd want to listen to me being, just a few months of investigating. So the funny thing about that is, fast forward about 2.5, 3 years, I think it was, I run into Steven again at an event, and I am talking to his cohort on the network for like 5 seconds because I got called out to do something. And I was like, oh man, I missed my chance on a live event. So I hurry back as fast as I could, being polite to the person who needed help, of course. And I get back and they're packing up. And so I'm like, oh, I missed my 15 seconds of fame. And he says, don't worry, we got you. And he goes, and by the way, the guy on the other end of the phone and we want to know if you want a show. And they offered it to me again. And I said, all right, this time. And so that's how the show started.
Perfect. Well, because, people get so intimidated when you're not someone who's easily intimidated, so I don't mean you, but people get so intimidated by a microphone. And it really is not something that you have to be fearful of. When I invite people to come in with me, sometimes if they're people because I talk to people who are fairly new, right? My collar is wonky. I'm sorry, it's scratching me. But anyway, when I talk to somebody who has never done an interview, they've never done whatever, they've seen me on I was on a television show. I've been on other people's vidcasts and stuff. And they're always like, oh, well, I can't come on with you. And I'm like, there's nobody better than me to come on with because I don't care if you've never done this before. I want people to know what your skills are or what you've done or what was your experience at this location, And so to me, it's so much fun to get people who have never even thought about doing radio or anything, and some of them have had the most extreme experiences that they've hidden because they were uncomfortable with sharing it because they were afraid of what people would think. Or they just think nobody wants to hear them like you did,
Right.
And yet there you are. And now, you're gangbusters. You are doing all of the things and doing them well, if I may say so.
Well, thank you. And like you, one of the things I like to tell guests that are like, I don't feel comfortable behind a screen being interviewed because I don't know what to say or anything. And I'll look at them and I'll say stuff like, well, don't think of it as an interview. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, you know how we're having a conversation right now? Yeah.
Yes.
The only difference is there would be a camera. It would be live, streamed out. But it would be no different, you and I just talking as we are. And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, don't worry. If you get lost or, you need help, I'm right there. I'm not going to leave you out to dry, and
Yes.
be like,
yes.
Well, what do you mean you don't know this or that? I'll be like, I'm there to help. And so I try to put them at ease. And most, I would say, if not all, I can't really attest. All, though, that have given me feedback where I really liked how you made it a conversation like at a table.
Yes.
It was much more comfortable than being bombarded by questions. And I was like, oh, I don't do questions. And they go, what?
I do if they get stuck. If somebody is nervous enough that they're kind of like, I usually just say, have you ever FaceTimed? Have you ever talked to anybody on FaceTime? And if they say yes, then I'm like, same thing. We're sitting there, we're talking about, experiences, locations that you've been to, things that you've seen, things that you felt. And they're like, oh, well, I can FaceTime. It's like, well, then you can do my show. So,
see, and that's something I love about being the paranormal podcasts or podcasting in general is we get to show the power of the mind, because people who are like in their head and going, oh, I can't do that. And we're like, trust me, you can.
Yes.
And we get them to come on, and they're like, flourish. And they're like, a really great show. And it's like, yeah, I could tell you were having fun. And they're like, yeah, it wasn't that bad.
Yes. And it feels like, they feel like it's almost a personal victory because they did it. And then they're never hesitant to do it again. So it's just fun. It's kind of like bringing people out of their shell. And do you find that people are sometimes nervous to share the extent of their paranormal experiences?
I believe they are. It's still relatively new when you think about it, where it's public knowledge, and that we have a lot of TV shows talking about it, and it's becoming what I like to call mainstream conversation.
Yeah.
To where there are still some places where you can go to and say, oh, do you have any paranormal or ghost stories about this place? And they're like, we don't talk about that here. And you go to the next town over and be like, so, what's your town like? Oh, well, we have this ghost that lives over here. We have this haunted place over there. We do ghost tours like 2 nights on the weekend. And you're like, oh, so you guys are a haunted town? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, oh, I want to hang out here.
I know, right? I love it especially when it's a surprise location that you didn't anticipate.
Right.
So
yeah, I do find, and I even had a couple of people tell me, because I was just doing conversation with them, that I got more of their experience than other hosts, because they were like, yeah, because of the questions you asked, I actually felt comfortable enough to go deeper and reveal more. And I could tell you were supportive. And I was like, absolutely, I'm supportive. I share some of mine sometimes on the show, so that brings another level of comfort.
Yes. You want to share some of them tonight?
Sure.
Okay, I have to ask. We're not going to go to your freakiest, okay? Not right off the bat. But what was your first experience that made you go, wow, there is seriously something into this?
Well, I would say you're going to love this one because it involves Captain Rob.
All right. I love Captain Rob experiences.
He and I were on a road trip, and we were going and meeting some people. And so how it started was...
Tell people who Captain Rob is.
Captain Rob, how do you describe Captain Rob?
A retired stuntman who has gone to all the lengths of the world to support children in hospitals and built an actual sailing ship out of popsicle sticks.
And also has wooden ships that sail and are in movies.
And has found ghost ships in his own searches. And the ghost ship that was in the tulip field.
Yeah, and he lives the pirate life, and he is so much fun to be around. He is just a great light energy, and he's gone through so much, and it's when you look at him and you like spend 5 minutes with him, you're like, I don't know how, with everything you've gone through, you are the way you are, but it's infectious. And he is one of the few people who when they say, you know, the old saying of, you know, you have a friend for life.
You do.
He is that. He's like, as long as you're honest, open, and authentic with him, he will be the same with you. And it's like a friendship unlike any other. And I've been so blessed to spend time with him and
Me
to be in
too.
the group and develop the friendship. So, I mean, we talk, and even though he's off doing what he's doing, he still will take the time to say, "How's your family?"
Yeah.
That's the kind of person he is. Is he's like, he will take a break, do what he's doing, have some fun, and, you know, joke around too some. So, you know, he's lighthearted.
But he can be very serious when the situation calls for it also,
Right.
like when he was going to rescue those Ukrainian children and getting them out of, out of Ukraine, out of Poland, and getting them in and their families if he could. You know, to
Right.
me, that is a human. He took me on his birthday trip to The Walking Dead. I
I
mean,
know. I've seen the photos.
with his family. I was a brilliant zombie except for the walk. I got good at the noise though. But it was really, so unexpected. I mean, everything he does has a lot of planning behind it that you don't see, and he seems like he's always spontaneous, right?
I know. It's like
And
even on the road trip, he's like, "Well, we're gonna go here, okay?" And he's like, "Well, let's go this route." Okay, and you know, you feel like you're doing a spontaneous road trip, and he's like, "Okay, we can stop here. Oh, let's look at the," and it's like he knows everything that's along the route,
yeah.
and it's like, how spontaneous was this? But it was spontaneous for me, so
Yeah,
that
it
was
was.
nice.
Well, he's just that guy. As a stuntman, they have to plan. And I have another friend who's a retired stuntman that's in the paranormal. And I told him about Rob, and he was like, "How do I not know him?" I said, "I don't know. But, you know, maybe you should."
Right, and
Because,
you know, one of the other things I will say about Captain Rob that really, to me, defines who he is we were going to Arizona for something, and he goes and says, "Have you ever been to the Grand Canyon?" And I said, "I had. You know, if I have, I probably was a wee little lad and
yeah,
don't really have memory of it." So he was like, "Okay." So we ended up doing what he needed to do. Went to the Grand Canyon and walked around, and he shared his stories of when he was there. And I was like, this is so cool
yeah,
that he would do this and take the time because, you know, we have certain times where we have to be at certain places, but he's willing to make the effort to go, here, we should check this out. And one of the fun things is on the way to the Grand Canyon, we stopped at Bedrock
yeah.
and saw all the Flintstone stuff from the outside because I think it was closed. And I was like, oh my God, I couldn't believe this. And whenever we found statues of like dinosaurs or bears on the side of the road, we would
Yep.
hop out, do photo ops.
And I came across something by mistake on my way home. Well, on my way back to Vegas from Contact in the Desert. I was taking Route 66, the part that you could still do. And there was this old school, gas station where I stopped and got a Coke in a bottle, right? But there was this beautiful rearing stallion statue right there. There's no telling what you're going to find when you're wandering through that desert.
Right.
So I love that y'all stop for all the photo stops. I do that too. It's
Yeah.
fun.
And on our road trip, we would stop at every state sign,
Yeah.
or we would stop at the visitor center to get a picture of the sign so we could say, hey, we're in this state now.
Yeah. That's just fun. Well, he is a really good ghost hunter.
He really is. I mean, he takes the portrayal of being like his like he always will joke in the groups and saying, if this happens, you'll find me at the bar. And so I'm thinking, okay. And so when I got to investigate with him, I was like half going, there's no bar around, so what's going to happen? And the other half of what's going to happen for me. And so the moment that I think really solidified our friendship and kinship to me probably would be when we were in West Virginia and we were at a haunted location that someone took us to, and it was a school. And in the school, I had an experience in one room because I went off on my own. I know the cardinal no of investigating, but I was like, what harm could there be? So, and
famous words.
I know.
Famous words, Michael.
And a spirit tries to push me through the floor. I could feel the pressure like pushing down on my shoulders. And I'm like, I'm not going through this floor. Stop.
Right.
And so I finally get free of that room and I'm back. And that was in a closet. So I'm back in the classroom. And I go out in the hallway and Rob is going, oh my gosh, you just missed it. I'm like, what did I miss? And he goes, my hat just got flicked off my head. And I was like, what? I was seeing this experience and they're flicking your hat off? I'm like, this hardly seems fair. They're more playful with you.
Well, but, yeah, they know who's easy to mess with.
Well, and then what's funnier is I go into another classroom and he's going off to check out, an area that he wants to. And we both hear this giggle. And we stop and we turn and look at each other. And then we hear his name. And we're like, where is that coming from?
Was it a kid giggle?
It was. It was like a little girl. And we're like,
love
no students in here. I mean, it's like the school was being converted into an art museum, or an art studio. So there was like one other person in the building, and it wasn't a little girl. And so then we heard the laugh again, and we both go darting towards this stairs, going upstairs, and I'm the only one that goes out on the balcony. He doesn't go out into the balcony area. And at my foot is like this really weird looking black mark on the wood. And I'm like, I should take a photo. And I take my digital camera, take 3 photos of it, because I learned my lesson. You take them in 3s. None of them came out. They all were blurry images. Everything else was perfectly clear for the school. And so I was like, that's peculiar. So we don't find the little girl, and we then proceed to go upstairs to the very top, and there's this area where there's a claim of a kid committed suicide. Well, when you walk in the area where it was said to happen, the windows are coated in flies. No other room in the building has flies, but this one area is full of flies, and we're like, that's a bad sign. Something bad happened here. And we're like, this has to be the spot. And then we walk away, and I go to do my thing. He goes and talks to the artist, and he's doing his thing, and we meet back up, and we go to the car, and and this moment is like solidified in my head. And I love this memory is he goes like this onto my car and says, Michael, I have to thank you. You didn't run. And I said, nope. I ran towards. I was like, I'm not a runner. And he goes,
oh, no.
Some people will say they won't run, and then they run for the hills at the first sign, but you held your ground. And I was like, yep. And so
I always figure if you run, they're going to chase you. You know, I I've been in situations that made me uncomfortable, and I just thought, if I run away, they're just going to enjoy that, you know,
right,
because that's what they're trying to achieve
yeah.
sometimes.
But to preface the importance of that moment was, from being in Ghost Ship Hunters, we will talk about, what if you met this spirit? What if you met this ghost? What if you
Yeah.
met this creepy image? And I would always write, I would not run. I would stay and talk. And so he was like, that's what he was saying is thank you for not running.
Right.
It was his way of saying thank you for being authentic on Facebook
Yeah.
and in real life.
Have you ever come across something that had you so disconcerted that you were pondering whether it was safe to stay there?
Actually, no. I mean, I've come across some really heavy, dark energies,
Hmm.
but I've never felt like I got to get out of here. So, when I preface that, is so there are times where I'll be like, there's a heavy energy here. I need to go outside. And it's not because of the heavy energy. It's just I've been in the location for a long time and just need to kind of step out, let go of the
Yeah.
energy of the building, and just kind of take a moment to rehydrate and, refresh. And that is one thing that I think a lot of investigators don't think about
You're right.
is drinking water, because we don't realize we're dry sweating, I think, as much as we do, because I have left some investigations where I'll get outside and I'll be feeling like, why do I feel like I'm coated in sweat? It's not even hot in there. And I'll be like, but I am coated in sweat.
Hmm.
And so we don't realize sometimes how much we actually are sweating during investigations.
Well, and that's where you get in. I mean, if it's hot and you're not hydrating, if it's just weird and the dry sweat, like you were talking about, the normal every day, you have to hydrate through the course of time. But if you're in a situation that you're a little on edge or there's a little excitement or, you know, and sometimes you just need to walk away from the energy and give yourself a chance to just kind of, like you said, just step away, regroup, rehydrate, kind of get some fresh air in your lungs, and then kind of center, right?
Right. Because, I mean, in all honesty, whatever's in there, if it's heavy, light, whatever it is, it's not going to sit there and go, oh, well, you walked out of the building, so I guess I'll go home.
They're
You know,
home.
they're there.
They're
They'll talk
home.
to you whether it's now or later. And
Yeah.
so we don't have to feel like we have to be brave and have to stick it out. It's like, no, we can walk out anytime and come back. They're not going to take offense.
Well, and because 99.99% of the time they're human. You know, these are humans who have passed and they had the human experience too. So they know that sometimes we have to take care of us too.
Right. And I will say, I find it kind of humorous how investigations have a habit of putting us in our place,
Yes, indeed.
because I will tell everyone, and yeah, I'm sure you've seen this in the group of, I will say, I don't instigate. There's no need to instigate. And there's never a reason for it. And then, of course, I end up on an investigation up in Bonham at a governor's house that they were remodeling. And I was in the, I think, third floor attic area, the attic entrance. And all of a sudden I feel something like trying to grab me, but it's like it can't actually grab me, but I feel it trying. And this lady that's channeling the spirits, she's like, "Oh, you need to go get so and so," because there was a big name on the property. And so they're like, "Okay." And I said, they're like, "You all can go." And I was like, "Do you want me to go?" And they're like, "No, you can stay." And I'm like, okay, this is going to get interesting, because all of a sudden it's like all my senses are up on high. And I'm like, something's up. And I feel my arm again starting to get hot. And I'm like, and I go and I say to it, "Are you trying to grab my arm?" And they go, "Yes." And I go, "You can't, can you?" And they go, "No." And I go, "And that scares you, doesn't it?" And they go, "Yes." And I'm like, and I'm sitting here going, okay, I'm in full defensive mode. All my abilities are up, and I'm like shielded up, and I'm like, okay, what is trying to attach to me? What's going on? Almost like you would say, like spiritual warrior mode. It's like I'm ready to take on whatever's coming and defending myself. And I go, and I literally hear come out of my mouth, "You know who I am?" And they go, "Yes." And I go, "That scares you, doesn't it?" And they go, "Yes." And you could hear in their voice they're scared. And I'm filming all of this. And it's the one time I felt like, wow, it was really cool that I had caught this on film. Mm-hmm. And I was like, so everybody then comes back up, and it's like we instantly break. It's like tension's gone. I'm back down to normal. It's like whatever was going on had its moment. We're done. It's like, the proverbial, face to face, and neither one stood down. So we were like, all right, fine, whatever.
We'll just live and let live. Yeah. As it were.
We're like, he's not going to run. You're not going to run. So it's not worth it. So we'll just stand down and be like, whatever. But it was like, yeah. And so people would always like say to me after that and going, "So would you call that instigating?" And I was like, I really wouldn't, actually, because I was just standing my ground.
Well, yeah. I mean, you weren't like challenging them, saying, you can't do this and don't you do that, or I'm going to do this to you if you, I mean, there's so many ways to be rude and obnoxious to a spirit. And you and I have seen all of them, I think.
Yep.
But you can't, had you been challenging being, well, you can't touch me or whatever, that could have ended very differently. And
and they could have taken it out on somebody else and said, well, if I can't take it out on you, this person I can, so I'm going to do something to them. And it's like, no, we're not angering anybody right now.
and people, people sometimes watch shows that do that. And I have a lot of friends who have been like Ghost Adventures, where there is sometimes some antagonism. And I always just say, Zach Bagans was a theater major. He knows how to do the dramatic. He knows how to get a reaction. And I don't have enough exorcists on staff to do that myself. Right? I do not have the staff that he has to help me get through something that happens like that. But if you watch, Ghost Hunters does a level of antagonism. Most investigators, to get that initial reaction, will do a little bit of, "Oh, come on, let me see you're here," or not those words, but, "Is there anyone here? Can you do this? Why don't you do that?" And it generally, I try to stay polite most of the time, but I mean, I I have ticked off a whole jail full of spirits in the past, and that was quite an experience and very unnerving. I mean, I didn't leave. I had to spend the night there.
Yeah.
And but it was definitely, they were a little provoked, but it was not something that I thought would provoke. And when it did, I was just kind of like, "Oh, whoa, this stuff is real." When they're angry, it's real what they can do.
Right.
So,
To me,
but I try not to do that.
you're actually nicer about it than I am. I'm like, I
Yeah.
will walk up if I see someone instigating and like antagonizing. I'm like, you better have the gumption and the balls to follow through and go and face what you are stirring up and
Stirring
not
up.
send anybody else. I'm like, no, that's the one thing I don't like about Ghost Adventures. And I tell people, I'm like, that's wrong, is to stir
I
up.
do tell people that that's wrong because, like I said, I don't have enough staff. I don't know anyone who has enough staff for that. And if it is the right spirit and you have irritated it to the point that you're fearing, reciprocity. Did I say that right? But
Yeah.
you know, but you don't know. And I don't care what anybody tells you about it's Aunt Sally in the basement. I mean, you don't know because we don't know. And if it's a negative, then it camouflages. It wants you to think it's Aunt Sally in the basement until it doesn't. And I don't
Right.
want to be the girl who is dealing with what was trying to, you know, get somebody involved on that level, which is why I don't provoke. I'm
Right.
just,
And you brought up something interesting that I was talking with someone recently about, and that is spirits are kind of under vampiric law. And by that, they mean so when you hear someone knocking at your door and there's nobody there, and you say, come in, you're inviting whatever's there
yes,
to come in.
yes, you are.
Spirits can't just walk in, they have to be invited. And so when you're provoking, antagonizing, or not even aware you're doing this, and you may
Just
feel
challenging.
like, oh, my next door neighbor who passed away, this feels like her, and I really miss her and I want to talk to her. And you're like, yeah, come on in. I really miss having you around. And it can turn
Yeah.
like that because you have invited in the spirit. And so
Yep.
you have to be very careful. And
You do.
I know it's going to sound strange, but somebody said, yeah, whenever a spirit comes to their house, they test it. And I'm like, you don't think of
Really?
testing it, but it's like, yeah, if you are inviting a spirit into your home, you best make sure who's coming in and that you also say, thank you for coming. You are now no longer welcome in. You need to go back.
Yep. Well, and that's one of the things that I was talking about where spirit can fool you. You know,
Right.
are you so and so and so and so? Well, sure I am. Just have me in. Just have me in. Let's have a conversation. And it's like, nope.
Right.
I don't think I want to have you in my home. And I I never invite something to, you know, if I'm at a location and I'm getting activity in an area, but it's time to move on, I will say, you know, I have to go up to the next floor or I've got to go wherever. If you would like to continue our conversation, you're welcome to join me there. But I've never told something, you're welcome to just join me without being specific about where, because
Right.
that's how you get attachments.
It
So,
is, and one of the things that we always will say at the end of investigations in one
yeah,
form or another is thank you, spirits, for taking the time to talk with us, sharing with us. But this is your home. We're going to go to our homes. You're not welcome to come for a ride
yeah,
either. You get to stay here, and we will leave now.
yeah.
And it's like, yeah, because we don't want it following us home and being like, okay, now I got to deal with this here.
Have you ever had something come into your home with you?
My personal feeling is no, but I've had my parents will tell me when I come back from investigations, things are a little wonky for a day or two. And so they're like, you brought something home. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I didn't feel it. And I have all these protections on my car and on me. So I don't know how it got here if it did, because it
Well,
shouldn't have been able to get onto the car. It shouldn't have been able to get onto me. So,
but they don't need to get onto you or onto your car because they're astral.
you know,
So, and I don't know if things work in a way that spirits are bound to a location or if they can travel. I do know that a jail in Ohio has been doing some experimentation and it appears that they can travel. I mean, like they they travel through in this instance they travel on trains that no longer run and they go to it's a jail where there's a lot of the old policemen who are still attached to the jail and they travel to New York on 9/11 and they've done it with evidence suggesting that for a few years now that the owner's been aware of it. So, there's all kinds of different ways that they can move around. So, the main thing is just to make sure that you've protected your home, I think, before you leave.
right. And
You know, but
another
they do
thing,
travel.
yeah, and another thing is I was fascinated by this that someone pointed out when they were at a location. It looked like this lady was walking through the walls, and they're like, so ghosts can walk through walls. And they said, well, yes, but here's another twist. And they said, here's the floor plan of the house when she was alive.
Right.
This wall was not here. There was a doorway here. So she's walking through the doorway. And when it looks like she's floating up to the next level, was because there was a stairway there.
Cool
And so they're
beans.
like, she's walking the route of her home, not the current home. And so that is something that investigators really need to start looking at before saying, oh my God, you really do have a ghost that's, able to float through, can float up through to the next level or going towards the attic. It's like, no, they're walking stairs that are just not there anymore.
Yeah. But, that can, stone tape theory is not just outside, right? And we'll talk about that when we come back. We're about to go to a break. But, yeah, there's all kinds of stuff still. We haven't even touched the surface, really. So we will be back. And for everyone listening, we do have chat open. So please go ahead if you have questions for Michael or comments, you can go ahead and pop them in there. And we will be back after this. Thanks for being here. We'll see you on the flip side.
I like that. That's cool. The flip side.
Ah, it is what it is, right? But Race will be taking us out. And, when you've done radio as long as I have, I'm in my 10th year, starting into my 10th year or finishing it. I'm not sure which. But one of my friends keeps up with that just impeccably. And I am not that good at it because life, and she's a very detailed person. And she started a year after me. So she always knows when my anniversary is.
Oh, yeah. So. I started radio actually last season, towards the middle of the season. So it is something to keep in to get used to, and it is trippy.
It is. And I am so fortunate. You know, I never get bored. I've never had a guest I wasn't having fun with. I have had one interview in my whole time doing this that was a dental experiment, right, with the pulling teeth thing. And that was just a fluke. I had heard that guest on other shows, and she was brilliant, and she is brilliant. And apparently she was just having a bad night. Something must have happened. And she went ahead and did the show. And I was like, I'm sorry that you were having such a bad night. And she was like, oh no, did it show? And I'm like, well, I just knew,
Yeah.
So, but it can be hard sometimes. It's very special when somebody gives you their time.
It is.
I always appreciate that.
And we as hosts always do our best to make sure it's got the most positive vibe and most positive outlook and the best light. So,
yeah.
Well,
I am going to try again to take us out to break. So we will be back. Thanks for being here.
While most near-death experiencers return to this plane of existence with alluring tales of their time spent in the presence of the divine, what happens when one crosses the veil into the afterlife, into the void? In the new book, Dying to Meet Them, Mindy Toutfest describes her journey to the afterlife after a devastating aneurysm, how a strange turn of events would lead her to spiritual growth, divine healing, UFO experiences, and a greater understanding of the universe. Get your copy of Dying to Meet Them today at Amazon.com or visit unxmedia.com for more information on this book and more amazing selections from UnX Media Publishing at unxmedia.com.
Debbie Ziegelmeyer is an experienced diver, dive trainer, and UFO investigator who has researched sites around the world that have water-related UFO activity. We now know that even the Pentagon admits that there are unknown objects in the skies and underwater around the world. Debbie compiled an amazing book to catalog many of these sightings. The Alien Colonization of Earth's Waterways, a reference guide to UFO, USO, water-related activity, has received rave reviews by UFO researchers and the public. The book is available at Amazon.com.
The UnX Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Kathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp full spectrum crude oil and coconut derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the Unnext Network website at unnextnetwork.com. That's unnextnetwork.com.
Welcome back to Paranormal Experienced with Kat Hobson. I'm so glad you're here. My guest tonight is Michael Kopf. We have been having a fantastic time, and now we're just kind of going into paranormal experiences, things that we've seen, things that we've done. Hey to Lori Dorsey in chat. I'm glad that you're here. And, I think that, Michael, our first hour was so much fun. It kind of laid the groundwork for how you got involved in the paranormal and into talk radio. And now I want to hear more experiences. I mean, you have been investigating some really cool places. And what is so far, because I know it'll change as time goes on, what's your favorite so far?
My favorite right now would be Fort Walters Military Base in Mineral Wells, Texas. And that is because we were investigating the PX and the bank building of the military base, part that was abandoned. And every time I would go and investigate there, except for one occurrence, it would be different.
Really?
And I would have either EVPs coming through. For the first time, I was getting like Class A EVPs, so that was exciting. Or I would be getting like I could hear stuff going on with my ears, no technology.
That's fun.
Like one example is when we were in construction of the haunted house that was going to be in there, I was walking past a main hallway in between the two sides, and the lady that owns it and her husband were on the right in this large area, and I hear this blood-curdling female scream.
What?
And I stop, and I'm like, who's there? And I open the door to the hallway. Nobody's there. I go over to the owner and her husband, and I go, who screamed? And then she's like, what are you talking about? I was like, there was a blood-curdling scream. And she goes, we didn't hear anything.
Wow.
And I was like, you guys are literally like diagonal with no walls in between. I'm like, how did you not hear this? But it's like moments like that it's like, paranormal investigators like dream of, wow, I'm hearing it. I'm getting this. And I was there on a Friday night, and we were playing military cadences because of being a military base, and we had 2 cat balls on the ground. One would go off during the cadence and taps. It was like it would go off more in taps. And what was interesting is, so that Friday night, I was there with 2 ladies. And we're sitting in the lobby, and this is one of those Class A EVP moments, is in the middle of the cadence when the guy takes his breath and goes to start the next run. I didn't hear it until I got home. There's a male voice that says, pause it. And I was like, wait, did I just hear what I think I heard? And I replayed it 3 times. And then I trimmed it, sent it off to the 2 ladies, and I was like, are you hearing this?
Right.
And they're like, yes, but we're missing the obvious. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, that's a male voice. So if that was your voice, we would have stopped the cadence.
Yes.
They kept going. So that's
like with the pause it. Yeah. So that is so cool.
But the most fun moment that was like, for me, I say fun, but also kind of like a paranormal investigation torture, so to speak,
Okay.
was the next night. I'm there with a friend's team, and I'm investigating with them for the first time. And there's this couple from Chicago there.
Okay.
And I'm like, this is really cool. So the couple goes into the doll room area of the haunted house. And so I'm like, okay. And I'm walking around with everyone, and we get to that room, and they're looking at me, and I go, what? And they go, where is this? What doll has batteries in it? I was like, none of them do. They're like, no, one does. I was like, no, I'm telling you, none of these dolls have any power to them. And she goes, well, every 12 to 15 minutes, one of them's laughing. And I'm like, wait, what?
Whoa.
And I was like, I was here last night. There's no laughter coming from this room.
Wild.
And I've never heard laughter coming from this room. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like questioning them, going, what do you mean laughter? You're like, what are you talking about? Where's it coming from? And they'll go, well, we can't figure that out. So I said, well, when's the next one? And they go, well, it's going to be in like a couple of minutes. And I was like, well, let's all stay and, let's see what they're talking about. And I'm totally thinking, honestly, I hate to say it, but my first impression is, what are these two doing to try and impress us? What are they hoaxing us or, testing us? What's going on? But then I hear this digital doll laugh. And I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? And I'm like, and I go, you guys aren't pulling my leg, right? And they're like, no, we've been listening to this, trying to figure it out. And I was like, all right, let's all kind of spread out. And whoever hears it the loudest, raise your hand. We tried to figure out where it's coming from. An hour and a half to 2 hours later, we were nowhere close to figuring out where this laugh was coming from. We tried straight lines, circles, corners. We were like, no matter what we would do, we all could not agree on where the sound was coming from. And I was like,
wow,
this is getting annoying. So we leave. And then a week later, I come back with two ladies. And my friend that kind of runs security for the haunted house was there. And she's a little skeptical. So I was thinking, this is perfect. And we tell her about the laugh. And she's like, I'd never heard it. And we're like, we can't promise it's going to happen. Because we all know as investigators, it's never really ever get the same thing twice. We got it.
You did not.
We spent another hour and a half maybe trying to figure out where this doll laugh is coming from. And come to find out, the owner says, oh, well, this doll makes that laugh sound when we sent her the audio of it. But we were like, but she requires batteries, right? And she goes, yeah. And we go, there were no batteries in her. She goes, no, there isn't. So we're like, well, we know where the sound's coming from.
Right.
But we don't know how it's coming. And so I put on the end of my little video about it going, so the owner has told us this is the doll that's making the laugh, but she has no batteries in her. So can
Right.
anyone explain how she's still laughing?
What did you get? Anybody have an idea?
No. It's like
Mm-mm.
nobody can explain how a battery operated doll with no batteries is laughing on a timer, so to speak.
Right.
And so I was getting ready to come up again and I was going to visit again. And I get a message from the owner and she goes, "You're not going to believe this." I go, "What?" She goes, "I heard the laugh again, but it wasn't in the doll room."
Where
And I was
was it?
like, "Oh, so now it's transferred to another room." She never said what room it was.
Wow.
But I was like, "Oh, this makes it even more creepy now because it has decided to leave the dolls and go to another area."
That is creepy. I mean, because that means that, you know, it can transit.
Well, not only that, but it's not attached to the doll because the doll
No,
was
it's
still in
random.
that doll room. So it was a free floating spirit just
Free
hanging out.
range. Free range spirit. Wow. That's something. You know, I love when we find something unusual like that because you think you've got it figured out, right?
I know,
And you so do not. So do not.
and to have it happen on two separate days, a week apart,
Yes.
and then have it happen again like months later in another location, and it's not you. It's like I cannot explain it. It's like this is truly a
A real
paranormal
thing.
experience.
Yeah. Well, that is so fascinating. And I don't know. I think that might did you find it more disturbing that it could transport to something else, or did that just seem logical to you? Have you had experiences where interaction did that to you?
I've had it happen before, and to be honest, every time that's happened to me, I've been excited by it because then I know
Yeah.
it's not someone messing with me because everyone's in the room. And so everyone's got to, if it was someone on their phone, playing the sound, you could easily go, well, somebody doesn't have their phone in the room. So, that's how
Mhm.
that happened. But we all were on our phones filming in the room. So it's like nobody could have pre recorded it to play it.
Right.
And that's the interesting thing is so to me it's like, this is a real spirit laughing because there's no other possible explanation because even if it was someone messing with us,
Mhm.
that day and a week later, that we didn't know about, how would they know to do
Yeah.
it a third time in another area? And none of us were there. So she was alone in the building. So it's like
Yeah.
that totally discredits anyone hoaxing us.
And you know, that is one of the reasons that I like small group investigations and do not like at all. Um, and I still will sometimes do them, but the group tours, like group ghost hunts, like with a company that does them or something, I I can never trust what my experiences are. And I do get evidence when I go to haunted locations because spirit interacts with me. But I like to be in a small group where I feel like it's like you said, there's more controls.
Right.
Because with those great big ghost hunts that have like 40 or 50 people in it's a big enough location that you're going to have some contamination, but not as much as you might think. I hate those things because I never trust the evidence that I get there.
So my
And
trick actually is when I do those is I view it as one, scouting, and two,
yes,
hanging out with whoever
yeah,
the guest is that I'm there for, and just building up a rapport with them. And so it's like I'm like,
yeah,
yeah, I'm not really here to investigate. It's more fun.
yes.
And
It's
if I
playing and social.
cool, if I don't, cool. And you get to watch other people going, look at this, and it's like, whoa, wait, back that up.
Yeah.
And it's like that is cool. And it's like, yeah, to me, it's more fun doing that than walking around with your equipment and going, okay, is this us? Is this them? Or is this spirit?
Yeah, I just use those as social occasions to meet people and you know, kind of I investigate, but I never bank on getting anything clear or
Right.
anything that's not possibly contaminated. In some of the locations, even big locations, if they're older, then they're not, you can get contamination between levels or between wings or whatever. One of
Right.
the one of the only locations, and I don't know if you've been here or not, but one of the only locations that I feel confident when I'm with even a moderate sized group is Old South Pittsburgh Hospital.
I haven't done
Because,
that one yet.
oh my goodness, when you come to do that, you have to let me know so I can be there when you do it. Please do that because it's my favorite location in the Southeast.
Absolutely.
It's a great haunting experience because do you want to hear something that happened there?
Absolutely.
Okay. It was so cool because it was just me and one other person in the hospital, and it was not somebody affiliated with the hospital. And we were sitting at the nurses station, which if you've ever watched a paranormal show that featured them, that's a very haunted location, and it genuinely is. Old South Pittsburgh is great, but we were sitting there and I had set my cameras down and had recorders out, and we were just kind of taking a breath, right? Because we were tired and it was hot. And there was a fan running, and Lori, my investigator friend, we do a lot of investigating together. But which is weird because she's from Ohio, but we just meet places and go investigate. So um she's sitting facing me and I'm facing the nurse's station. They have two little love seats there, and I'm messing with equipment and looking at stuff, and the fan feels good. Right. So there's those little punch ball balloon kind of things, like they have
Right.
the rubber band on punch balls. Well, there's one that's in there, and Lori has gone quiet, and I'm not sure why. It took me a minute to notice it, and she's just waiting on me to notice that balloon is going toward the fan, right? And stopping in front of the fan, and it's like it's straining to stay there, and then it just shoots off. And then it will do it again. It did it several times, and we have it on film, but it was I've never ever seen anything like that. And it did it, Michael, for like 5 minutes. And there's no, because I kept waiting to see if there was some sort of thing. I didn't get up while it was happening because, but I think it would have done it all night if we hadn't gotten up. I mean, it was not really, it got to where it looked like it was harder, like it was shaking more, straining to stay in front of the fan, right? Toward the end, like it was effort. And I was just like, "You're seeing this, right?" And she was like, "I've been seeing it. I was just waiting on you to notice. And I'm like, there is no way that something could be violating the laws of physics to do this. I mean, it's just a balloon. It's not a
Right.
ball. It's not something that could be weighted. And even if it was, to be able to go to a fan, because we checked it out. It really was a balloon. And I mentioned it to the owner, and he was like, yeah, that happens. Like, okay. Well, I have footage of that. And they had what was happening on their cameras, like their security, because it was insane. And by the way, that owner's name is Ronnie D. And if you haven't interviewed him, you might want to. He's awesome.
All
So,
right.
and he's a good interview too. But yeah, if you go to South Pittsburgh, I want to go too,
Definitely.
because maybe we can get something scheduled and just do an investigation with a few people. And I love it. That's one of my favorite locations on the planet.
Yeah, it's
So,
on my list. I've seen it on a lot of shows, and I'm like,
yeah.
it's interesting looking. And actually, one place, it's funny we're talking about locations. There is one spot that I know of. Well, now I know of two, and so I'm curious how many are there. And I'd love to do a paranormal investigation at are the places where the gravity is not in effect,
Yeah.
where you put a ball and it rolls uphill.
Yes.
Like,
Oh my
wait,
gosh.
I'm like, I totally want to go find one of these and be like, oh, we totally got to investigate this and be like, try and figure out what is causing this and why and how big of an area is this gravity distortion.
I know, right? And they do exist. But
Yeah,
I just
I was watching a friend of mine. He runs the eTalk.tv network,
Mhm.
and he was there with his friend Brad Olson, and they literally were on the road, and they put the car in neutral, and the car started going uphill on its own.
uphill.
And I was like, wait a minute, this is a car. So
And it was going uphill?
it was.
Oh
And
gosh.
I was like, what kind of gravity distortion is strong enough to pull a car? I'm like, and they did the soda can. And I was like, I can get the soda can. There's not a lot of weight to that. But I was like, yeah, they were commenting, sitting in the car going, look, the car is in motion. Granted, it's not going very fast, but the fact that it was moving at all, I was like, oh man, I would love to get
That
the
would be cool. I have
see.
seen those, and people have said, well, actually, it's just a trick of it's an illusion. It really is on a slope, yada yada. But to go uphill is entirely different. I
Right.
mean,
And
going downhill, you could buy the slope, right? But to go from inertia to moving uphill, no, there's no way.
no, and I've even gone as far as to hear claims of people getting sick in these places because the gravity is so distorted. And I'm like, that would just be so fascinating to be able to go and document and be like, this is real. And,
Yeah.
I mean, we can watch videos all the time and you can tell, by their expressions when, you're being played and
Yeah.
then there's genuinely like shock. And my friend is sitting there, and I will not forget this moment as we're watching the video, and he's like sitting there, and he's like, "Dude, we're moving," and he's like, "What do you
I'd
mean?"
freak
He's
out.
like, "We are like, I'm in neutral. We're moving. I'm not giving the car any gas. I mean, you can look at the window. You could see we're moving, like maybe 2-3 miles an hour." was their speed, I would guess, because it was really slow, but it was enough to notice movement. And it's like you could tell in their voice, they were genuinely like, oh my God, we are going uphill. You know, we are not using any gas.
That would be disconcerting, to say the least. That's nuts. Well, what do you, I mean, the gravity distortion is fascinating. Do you know of any place? I know there are some in Texas, but time slips. Have you experienced a time slip, or do you have friends who might have?
You know, I have experienced a time slip, and it wasn't in Texas. It was actually in Mississippi.
Really?
And I was in Vicksburg, and I didn't realize at the time I was experiencing a time slip. I just thought, maybe this is a past life memory. Because, so the story goes, I was in the car with my parents, and we were taking a tour of Vicksburg battlefield. And I'm in the back seat, I'm pretty sure, if memory serves right. And all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, I can smell the gunpowder. There's a battle going out to the right. The Union line is moving up, and the Confederates are right here, entrenched in. And, there's a few soldiers moving up this way, and there's cannon firing. And it's like I'm describing this battle taking place.
Wow.
And mind you, if you've ever been to Vicksburg battlefield, the only thing out there are basically the cannons and a few spots and monuments. So the fact that I was seeing these troops moving around was a surprise to me, and that I could smell the gunpowder, smell the blood in the air. And I was like, I almost felt like I could just reach out and touch everything.
Wow.
Well, I had Dr. Heather Lee Langdon on one of my shows, and she was talking about time slips. And I said, well, let me describe this situation. And I described to her the Vicksburg situation I just described to you. And she said, because all 5 of your senses were engaged, and in that moment, you were there.
Yep.
You time slipped and you watched what was happening there. And it's incredible that you were able to retain what you saw and bring it back live in the moment. So it was like I'm sitting here being a news anchor relating the blow-by-blow play of what's happening 100-some years ago.
Right.
Now in real time. And I'm like, and it was like, wow, to be able, and I thought that was a rare occurrence. And I had someone else I did a show last night with, Eric Wood. I don't know if you know him, the Paranormal Highway.
Okay.
Gypsy Road was his original YouTube name.
Gotcha. Okay.
But he was sharing a story from Gettysburg, and it was like, I would say that was a definite time slip experience.
I had one at Gettysburg. It was very strange. It's you need to shield if you go. But I was driving in from Washington. I had landed at Reagan and was driving into Gettysburg for an event, which, by the way, the Gettysburg Battlefield Bash is one of the most powerful fundraisers for Wounded Warriors of Pennsylvania and children with cancer. They do, everything goes to them. So it's a good event to go to. But I wasn't shielded because I didn't realize I was so close to Gettysburg. And you need to shield when you're there because the power is so overwhelming. But I was just driving down. I thought I saw reenactors down around a house. And they were just wandering around in the woods behind the house. And they had like a little campfire and everything going. And I thought, that's very realistic, you know. And then they were gone. And it didn't dawn on me until they disappeared that they weren't real. So, or maybe they were real. And but I mean, I also had experiences on the battlefield itself. I mean, everywhere there is a battlefield, but on the battlefield that's marked as such it's a trippy place. I feel like if you're open to it, that you're going to get an experience there. Hello, Yolanda. And, Yolanda has a comment, and she says, what about when you're driving and you know where you're going and you end up there without knowing how you got there?
I've had those moments.
I have had that happen. I was there like an hour and a half early. So, and it was a 6-hour drive. So I was glad I was there early, but I don't know how I got there early.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
but I did.
I would go and visit a friend that's like 45 minutes away. And I would remember getting on one highway, and the next thing I know, I'm on her doorstep, and it was a 45-minute drive. And I'm like, wait, how did I just get here?
Yes.
And I would always jokingly say, whoever took over the car, thank you for not damaging it.
And thank you for not damaging me.
Drive.
Yeah. I mean, because it's so... Were you not just completely tripped out? I was tripped out. I had no idea. And I'm like, I don't speed through those little towns once you get off the interstate, because that's a ticket waiting to happen.
Yep.
So, I don't know. And it's a drive I make all the time. And some days it just feels like it's a lot longer than others. And some days it is. But, it's just so... I'm glad you brought that up, Yolanda. Thanks. Because that is something that a lot of people will tell you, oh, yeah, that happens to me. But an hour and a half difference was...
That's a lot.
I mean, when I told my husband, because when I get there, I call my husband and tell him I'm there. And he was like, what did you do? Like, I just drove. I don't know. I'm here. I don't know how it happened. So,
yeah.
And I will speed, but not through there.
Yeah, and the hard part is when you get there and you're knocking on the door and you're like, yeah, I have to be honest. I don't know how I got here because I remember getting on this highway and then I was here. And the look on their faces, it's like, yeah, I gotta stop telling people these stories.
I know. Just quit being... I feel like that too. Just quit being so honest. Nobody's ready for this. But it's just like when you see UFOs. I mean, people are trippy about that too.
Yeah, and I was blessed because my parents knew this lady who was a medium channeler, and they said that they were at an event and someone asked, why do only certain people see UFOs? And she said, let me put it to you this way. And I may have the numbers wrong, but the way I remember it is you have 30 people in a room and a UFO comes down and parks itself and hovering outside in the parking lot. 10 people are diehard believers. They're going to go out there and be like, oh my God, look at this UFO.
Yeah. 10
people are on the fence and they may be like, what are you looking at? Oh, what is that? Is that a UFO or is that, a trick of the clouds or a trick of the lighting? And the 10 non-believers will walk out and be like, what are y'all staring at?
Yeah.
What are y'all pointing at? There's nothing there. They won't see it because their filters are not set up to see it. So unless you're open to it, you'll never see it. So that's why some people see it and some don't. And I love that explanation.
I do too. And I can see that. I mean, truly, I can see that because the first time I saw when I was a kid, and I was with a bunch of military people who I had seen jump out of airplanes and been around their helicopters and all that other stuff. I was in 6th grade, and I was like, "What is that?" And they were like, "Oh, that's a helicopter." I said, "No, it's not. I've been to your jump sites. I've seen helicopters. That's not a helicopter." And they all just kind of, you know, "Oh, you're just, being a silly kid, whatever." But every one of them looked at each other like, wow, you know. But and that was my first time, and I see them a lot, and I know that some of them are satellites, but I see some that move a lot faster than satellites do. I've seen recently, two of them together, and it's almost like they were incandescent. They were like glowing marshmallows, and they were traveling next to each other. But they were far enough apart that they weren't in tandem. They were just traveling together. And
Right.
that was, and I didn't know how many satellites were in Starlink, but I had not yet, but I always wanted to see Starlink. So I was just kind of like, oh my gosh! I came inside and I told David, I just saw Starlink, I think. And so I messaged a friend of mine who works, doing that, and I said, "What is the smallest number of these?" And they were like 22. I was like, "Oh, probably was not Starlink, but still cool."
Yeah.
So I was, and I mean, I've seen air refuelers. We have an air refueling base here, and that was not what it was. I mean, it seriously looked like a couple of marshmallows, like that shape, and it was just so surprising. And I was so disappointed that it wasn't Starlink, if you can believe it. So the last contact in the desert I went to 2 years ago was, or I think it's 2 years ago. I don't think I went. I did go last year. Okay, I stand corrected. But we did get to see it. So it was pretty amazing.
Well, there you go. And it's interesting you point out the military, perspective, and we have now paranormal shows where you see like hospital,
Yeah.
doctors, nurses, paramedics, and firefighters or police are now coming forward and sharing their stories. And I think
Yeah.
that's great. But at the same time, I interviewed a couple of police and they said we have to be very careful what shows we go on. We have to
Yeah.
be very careful what we say. And we cannot divulge everything that we've seen. And I said, why? And they go, because our bosses are watching and they can make life really difficult for us, or virtually it's like it still unfortunately is, do not
Taboo.
talk about this. Even though it's
Yeah.
something they're going through, it's like, and I think part of me is like, I think that's really sad that they're still under that restriction.
Well,
But then again, I think about it in the terms of, with the way people are today, if a person in need was to see a cop who said, "Oh, I seen a UFO or I seen a dead person talking to me
right.
and helped me solve this," they're going to be like, "You're nuts. I don't want your help." And it could be the best help for them, but
Right.
they're going to be like, "No." And so it's like they have to, in order to do their job, keep hidden a lot of stuff. And I think that's sad, but I get it.
I agree. But with the well, that's why the military they have to be out. Yeah, unless they have achieved a certain level of rank and they're close to out anyway, they still have to be out before they can really go public. And I know I'm going to sound like Linda Moulton Howe. I know a retired general, whatever.
Right.
But I do know a retiree of great rank who was honest about being a man in black. And it after I was going to be interviewed on another show and I wanted to talk about that. So I sent him an email and said, can I have some more details? And he was like, oh dear, no. I wasn't really a man in black. I just flew into this airport and, met up with some friends and we all were out of uniform because we've been doing stuff. So we had to rent a car to drive up to where it was. So the car just happened to be a black car. And so all three of us were out of uniform in dark suits. And I'm like, yeah, so that was coincidence, right? No. You've already told me the truth. I'm just asking for more details so that I can talk about it. And I won't say who you are. And he was like,
nope.
I just happened to be in a black suit, renting a black car, going to a UFO location.
So either someone came to talk to him or he's like, no, if you say this on another show, they're going to know it's me and I don't want these people on my doorstep.
And, the weird part is that someone of his rank who was retired and out of it, right? But they still have NDAs that are lifelong. And to me, that says a lot, right?
It does.
If you're still under your NDA, but you've been retired for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, then that's a pretty strong NDA.
It is.
And I think it's because of a panic. We have things happening in our world right now that people react to greatly. And, we've got the worst anti-Semitism since Nazism happening now. And it may exceed that. But, we don't. I think that it would be nice to have that distraction. But I think that people are so volatile. And right now we have such a society that nobody really wants to give an inch conversations or meet in the middle or find a way to be together. Even if you have to be separately in the same area, But it's a dangerous place when you start getting people who are afraid reacting. And then you have the shows like what is that show?
American Horror Story?
No, the one with the aliens Independence Day.
Oh,
yeah,
Independence.
And I can totally see people reacting like, up on the building in LA with the sign saying, welcome to Earth, and then get zapped by them. Because I think that there's so many different ways that scenario could play out. You don't know what we're going to get when it shows up.
I know, and it's interesting how Hollywood has us mind trapped about it because, like you're saying, Independence Day, they were like, hey, come, you come in peace, come in, we're here to welcome you. They get killed. You look at shows like V. We're here in peace. We're here. We have all this medical technology. We have all this great technology.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we're harvesting you for food.
Yeah.
So, it's like, yes, we'll help you if you give us so many of your population. It's like, well, no, that's wrong. We're not your food. So that's not a fair trade-off. So we're taught to be skeptic.
Yeah.
And it's like, so we're either going to strike first or be like questioning everything they do to the point to where they're like, no, we're not going to help you. You don't want the help.
Yeah. And, you sit there and you're just kind of like, this would be so beneficial. There are so many ways, because if they do have this technology that we see, I mean, people see it. And if that's our technology and we can do that, then we can have world peace, because by jingo, you can get everybody's attention, you know, um, and make a conversation happen.
Right.
And I think that I think that I think it's scary to the powers that be to have a happy and content populace, because then you can't pit people against each other. And how would you rule if you weren't villainizing somebody to support somebody else? And that flips every generation. Somebody else is the bad guy. So it's just kind of like, it's easier to control people if you keep them afraid and angry.
Right. And I I do have one source of where that all started, but it's like I don't want to alienate your audience by
Oh, you're
pointing
not.
out. But so I like to say to people, look at religion. When like Christianity started, we were all the children of God. We were
Yeah.
all made in His image.
Yeah.
We're all equals. We're all sons and daughters. Then what happens is the Council of Nicaea and a few other councils strike. Books from the Bible are removed.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the divine feminine is erased and vilified, and you are no longer divine being. You are servant to this power. And if you want to be saved, you have only one option to be saved. And it's like, wait a minute. How did we go from matriarchal to patriarchal, loving to fearful? And everybody says, well, look at God of the Bible. It's like Old Testament, you fear him. New Testament, you love him. And I'm like, you might want to relook at that, because you're not exactly loving in the New Testament. Yes, he is more forgiving than the Old.
Yeah.
But I would see all these billboards, and what got my mind really thinking about it was they would all say, I am second. And I was like, what is that? And someone had to explain it was, you are second to Christ, who is first to God. And I was like, I'm not second to him. He's my brother. We're equal. And they're like, that's blasphemous. I'm like, that's Christianity. What are you talking about?
Well, what people forget is, Old Testament God, New Testament God, same God. It's not a different God.
I would argue that, because the mannerisms and the verbiage are completely different.
In the human authors. But it is still Old Testament God, New Testament God. It is still the same God. The only difference is the story of salvation, as opposed to having to do sacrifices and everything else. And, in the New Testament, Christ was the sacrifice to take over to save people, as opposed to that's just my opinion. Opinions are like, we know what, but my interpretation is that he was the ultimate sacrifice. And if you follow that trend, that narrative, and a lot of people don't, a lot of people do, but if you follow that narrative, then you don't have to do the sacrifices and other things to appease God from that point, because that's already been done with the ultimate sacrifice of a human who is divine. I get confused with a lot of that, which is amazing, because I was very well taught in that. But it's been a long time. But I still feel like you can't separate God. But I do think that you're absolutely on spot with matriarchal decline. Well, it wasn't even a decline, it was a removal.
Right.
And as a member of the matriarchal side of the clan, right, I just feel like that's so wrong, because you've got to have perspective. You cannot just go through and remove half of your population and make them subservient, and yet that's what happened. You're absolutely correct with that.
Yeah.
And
Everyone's okay with it. That's the other thing. I'm like, wait a minute. How
well,
how are you okay being told I have
men are okay with it.
this? No,
So
I've talked to quite a few women who went through the church, and they were like, well, it's the way of the church. It's the way, God wants it. So and I'm like,
it's the way the men taught it.
this.
It's the way the men taught it. But it's I don't know. Christianity is a very tough subject, and I don't usually discuss religion.
I don't
But
usually either.
yeah, we're probably going to get all kinds of letters about this. But it is something that's fascinating. And yeah, the ultimate paranormal experience was Christ being crucified and rising. That was such an extreme circumstance. And he could raise the dead. He could alter anything in the universe, and did. And people still doubted him. So
Yeah. So I will say this to everyone who's going to be writing us about this. Do your homework. Look at the verbiage of pre-councils, especially Nicaea, and after, and you will notice there are differences.
yeah.
That is the moment it changed. It was not divine intervention. It was a king who decided he wanted to change the faith.
Yeah.
So I would say do your homework before you
Yeah.
come at either one of us. And
just always know that these are our opinions.
right.
And you and I have differing opinions on some of that, and we're friends.
We are.
So, and we'll still be friends. So that's okay.
I mean, I'm here for another episode, so we're obviously okay with that.
Absolutely. And someday you're going to have me on too. So obviously I'm okay with that.
Definitely.
So, it's just, I just love being able to have these open conversations, even though we're almost out of time. But tell people where to find you right quick.
So you can find me and my shows on YouTube. And if you search The Energy That Surrounds Us, Paranormal Verses,
Great show,
and Writing Through the Unknown, you'll find my channels. I'm also on Rumble, and the shows there is Tetsu is The Energy That Surrounds Us, because I felt like shortening the name. And Writing Through the Unknown has its own channel. I have a channel, Michael Kopf's Adventures, on Rumble, where I share interviews and videos of insights now and different pieces of research I've done and made into videos, or if I was a part of a show, made an appearance, I'll share it there. So it's kind of like my journey. And Paranormal Verses has its own Rumble channel. And if you want to listen to us on radio, we are on Spotify, and we are on etalk.tv, which has its own web-based radio station, so you can listen to a bunch of shows. And so I also now air on X. I finally broke down because it's no longer called Twitter.
Yeah.
We got an account on X, so I don't know what they call when you post things now.
We'll find out.
I'm like, it's not a tweet anymore. So I'm grateful I can keep my word of I do not tweet.
You're too funny. But we are going to have to start wrapping this up because we have got Clyde Lewis coming behind us. And Ground Zero is a great show. So if you haven't watched it, he's coming right behind us and it's going to be awesome. So, Michael, I just absolutely enjoy talking to you. And
I enjoy it too.
I think it's interesting that we moved to religion because of ufology. And, it really is something that, Al back here has his own opinions on it. And I just find the interrelation between, paranormal, spiritual paranormal, ufology, which is also paranormal because it's not within the realm of the normal, different kind of concepts. It's not just ghosts, it's, Bigfoot, it's demonology, it's all these other things that all of these are under the same umbrella. And so being able to talk about things that a lot of people don't is pretty cool. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for having me again and creating this space for all of us to be able to have these conversations.
I think they matter, right?
They do.
Yeah.
Your show matters just as much.
Yeah. Everything comes around. And we're all so much more alike than we are different. So I think that's pretty important to remember sometimes too.
It is. It's like I never would have imagined having some of the conversations we've had because it's like we create all these illusions in our head of, oh, this person's this way, or everybody says this, so this person's going to do it too. And then when you finally, the universe puts it in front of you and pushes you to speak about it, it's like, wait, that did not go as I thought it was going to go.
I get a lot of that. But we do. We have to go so that we can turn the network over so that Clyde can get on here. And I just appreciate you. And for everyone listening, thank you so much. You're the reason we do these shows, and your input's great. Thank you, Yolanda, for joining us in chat with Lori, and Race is in there too. So we'll see you next week. Same cat time, same cat channel. Y'all come on back. Good night.